All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited to be able to introduce our panelists this afternoon who are going to be talking to us about the ADA compliance deadline that is coming up within the next 7 months. So from the UL system, we have Alyssa Coates, who is our web accessibility coordinator, as well as our graphic designer and brand manager, and any other wonderful thing that we ask her to do. We have Dr. Whitney Civil Sawyer from Louisiana Tech, Meredith King from University of New Orleans, and Brashana Scurfield or Bree from University of Louisiana Monroe presenting for us this afternoon. So I'm going to turn my camera off and turn it over to Alyssa, who will explain a little bit more about what 88 is and why we're putting on this event.
All right. Hello, everyone. Like Katie said, my name is Alyssa Coates, and I work for the University of Louisiana System as the Web Accessibility Coordinator. We're excited you could join us for our first webinar in our Accessibility Essentials series. And I'll go ahead and jump in and give you a background of why we're all here today. So let's start off with the basics. What is digital accessibility? Digital accessibility means making sure our websites, apps, and online content work for everyone, including people with disabilities. PPM 74 was updated in June 2025 to align with the new federal standards issued by the Department of Justice. PPM 74 is Louisiana's policy that ensures people with disabilities can access state government services online. These standards are tied to Title II of the ADA, which prohibits discrimination by state and local governments in all of their services, programs, and activities. Almost everything we do digitally is considered a program, service, or activity. Think beyond just our websites. This would mean our websites, obviously, microsites, LMS platforms, PDFs, Word docs, PowerPoints, videos, podcasts, even social media. So basically, if we offer it, it must be accessible. The standards we follow come from Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG 2.1, and this outlines how to make web content usable for all people, especially those with a disability. And accessibility isn't just about vision or hearing. It also includes mobility, speech, cognitive, and neurological disabilities. It's a really wide spectrum, so our content has to be flexible and inclusive in how it's designed and delivered. So why does this matter? Accessibility matters because it ensures equal access for people with disabilities. This isn't just a small group of people. It's nearly 28% of our residents that live with some form of disability. It's not only the right thing to do, but it's now a law. Compliance with the ADA protects our institutions from potential lawsuits. And accessibility benefits all users. When we design for clarity, structure, and mobile friendliness, everyone gets a smoother experience. So let's talk about the foundation of accessibility. WCAG 2.1 is built on 4 big picture principles. Think of these are of the building blocks. Everything we create must be accessible, and it must be perceivable, which is information must be presented in ways people can actually perceive. It has to be operable. Users must be able to navigate and interact with your content. It has to be understandable. The content and navigation must be clear and predictable, and it has to be robust. Content must be compatible with current and future assistive technologies. If a document fails at any one of these principles, it's not accessible. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Meredith from UNO, who's going to talk a little bit about each principle.
Hey y'all, so just to give you an idea, what we're going to do is Alyssa gave us this fantastic overview of what we're doing, why we're doing this, and those basic core principles. I'm going to break down what those are a little bit more high level, and then talk about some of the main things that you're going to see in a lot of different types of documents that we're going to be discussing today. So you can think about it kind of like a funnel, right? Alyssa gave us a big overview. I'm going to give us like a slightly more detailed one about these things, and then we're going to get even more detailed, and then we're going to have some demos of how you remediate some of these types of documents. So it just keeps funneling down, giving you information that you need. So when we're going over these ideas from these principles, I don't want you to think that you have to know how to fix these or understand what each and every piece of this means. That's part of why we're doing this. This is largely awareness. It's not going to be able to fix every single thing. Okay, so let's get into what this is now that we have that little caveat. So the first thing that we have is perceivable. That means that the screen reader has to be able to perceive it in the way that someone who is sighted would, or in a way that would work to be able to get that information, similarly to how a sighted person would understand that page. So the first thing that they're going to be is going to be text alternatives. We're going to talk about alt text a few more times today. And we're going to talk about it again when we talk about media in our next webinar next month. But alt text is huge. Alt text is huge. If you think about it for images, you have to mark little text in every image talking about what that image is, or mark images as decorative, because someone who has vision impairment can't see that image to know what it is. You have to have your document be adaptable. So you have to use semantic structures, heading, lists, tables, bookmarks. We're going to talk about all of those today in detail, I promise. You can't rely on color alone to convey meaning. We're going to talk about that also. We'll talk about color contrast a little bit. So normal text, you need a 4.5 to 1 ratio. Large text, you need a 3 to 1 ratio. We'll talk about that again a little bit later. This is just that big overview. You need to make sure that content can be read at a large zoom, that it flows correctly. So think about when you have an image and you try to blow that image up and then it just looks like a bunch of pixels. You want to make sure that someone who needs to look at large images is going to be able to have that scale correctly, or large format of the document, that it's going to scale correctly, that it's going to resize correctly. Um, Non-text has to have a contrast as well, non-text objects. So the same way that your text has to have that color contrast, icons and graphics have to meet those same contrast requirements so that you can see that contrast on the page. And then you have to have good text spacing, right? You need to make sure that document remains readable with adjusted spacing. You can think about this like, I'm sure, a thing you have said to your students all the time: don't use single space, use double space. If you use single space, I can't see it. There's no room. It's hard to read on the page. That's what we're talking about here at a high level. Okay, so now that we can perceive the page, we need to be able to operate that document. So most screen readers, they use keyboard navigation. And there's a really obvious reason for this. If I'm somebody with a vision impairment, I can't necessarily know where my mouse is in relation to what I'm supposed to be looking at. There's no way for me to know to highlight certain text to read it if I can't see my screen. Seems kind of obvious when you think about it. So everything has to be keyboard accessible. Navigation has to work with just the keyboard only. And as part of that also, you can't trap users in a form or a text box. They have to be able to escape or get out of it using their keyboard as well. That cannot just be point and click out of some sort of form field. Again, it has to be navigable, so it has to use page titles, descriptive links, bookmarks. We're going to talk about all of that today. And you have to make sure that you have focus visible, so buttons show the visible focus where it knows that the screen reader knows that it's going to have to be able to focus in on those. That's probably not something you are going to have to deal with as you remediate your documents, but again, we want to go over all of these types of things that go into what operable is. Okay, so now we're perceived, we're operable. It needs to be understandable. What's the point if we can see it and we can operate it? If we can't understand it, that's not very useful. There's some basic things that are going to make this understandable. You have to have your language set. Screen reader has to know what language it's working in. We don't want it to be trying to read Spanish if the document is in English. Got to tell it, right? Screen reader doesn't automatically know. We have to tell it. We want to make sure that we're using clear, plain language in our documents. Now, obviously, if you're using something like a textbook or an article that you didn't write, there's not much you can do about that. But when you are creating documents, you want to make sure that you're using clear, plain language. We want to make sure that that navigation is predictable. We want consistent navigation. We want to make sure our table of contents matches our headings. Again, we're going to go into all of that a little bit more, but you don't want the screen reader to get confused, have one thing labeled as chapter 1 and the next thing just as the chapter title in chapter 3. Again, close your eyes, trying to imagine navigating that with a keyboard. That would be extremely confusing. So we don't want to do that. And then we want to have input assistance. If there are things that need to be filled out, we want to make sure that those form fields are clearly labeled so people know what they need to input and identify any errors clearly. And finally, we need to make sure that it is robust. So it needs to be compatible using proper tagging and document standards. We're going to go into what all of those are. We need to make sure that there are no broken or corrupted tags. It's called parsing. We want to make sure our metadata is clear. Metadata is the stuff that's stored inside the file that tells the computer all of this information about when the file was created and how the file works. So it's going to be stuff like title, author, and subject fields. We're going to want that filled out in our metadata so that the computer can read that information. And then a huge, huge, huge one is OCR. Okay, OCR stands for Optical Character Recognition. And this is the thing that makes the screen reader able to read PDF text or image text. I don't know if you remember this, but when PDFs started back in the last century, essentially what you were doing was really just taking an image of something. And you can't get the text from that image without OCR. Think about it like this. Remember when you would take, I don't know, a picture of an address and you'd send it to a friend on your phone. It's just a JPEG, just a picture. You send it to them and you say, meet me here, and it's just a picture. And before phones did OCR automatically, your friend would have to copy down that address or remember that address and type it into Google Maps manually. And imagine if they couldn't see that, what's gonna read it to them, right? Nothing is going to be able to read it to them. OCR allows it to be pulled from that image, the text from that image, so that it can be readable by a screen reader. So now, when you take take a picture of that address, your phone automatically does OCR lots of times, and it'll just pull the text. You can copy it, paste it. You're not worrying about it. That's like a small scale version, because if you are someone with vision impairment who relies on a screen reader without OCR, your screen reader will just tell you that that document says blank, nothing in it. And you cannot read it. This is really with PDFs. Can't read it, can't see it. So you have to make sure that image-only PDFs are converted with OCR. They have to have OCR. It is one of the biggest things. I'm not trying to harp on it too much, but it is absolutely essential to make sure it's the first step for accessibility with PDFs. Okay, so that's our high level overview. Let's talk about some of the things you're going to be looking for more specifically when you're talking about document accessibility. Some of the big things to know about, they're going to be things like headings, bookmarks, and tags. Okay, so headers, they're really going to create the outline of the document. You may have seen things that look like they say H1, H2, H3, or heading 1, heading 2, heading 3 in terms of styles. Those are creating a heading section that lets screen readers jump by heading. So the same way that you would sort of look and be able to see a heading on a page visually, you want the screen reader to be able to do the same thing. So you could think of the heading 1 as the title of the work, heading 2 is the subtitle or the subtopic. Heading 2 always has to come under heading 1. It has to flow naturally. You cannot have a heading 2 before a heading 1. It will confuse the screen reader. It will be like, I'm looking for a heading 1. I don't know where to start, right? You can't start at a subtitle. You have to start at a title. Bookmarks are like digital navigation markers. So they're like a clickable table of contents. So as the screen reader goes through, you want it to be able to use the table of contents the way that you would. You want to be able to see where chapter 3 is in this book and go straight to it. You want your screen reader to be able to do the same thing. There's no reason why it shouldn't be able to, and that's why we have to have bookmarks. Tags are like invisible labels that define the structure. So that's like the heading, the paragraph, the list, table, image. Those establish the reading order and the relationships within certain types of documents. So if you've ever seen things like that H1 inside of carets or P inside of those carets, those are tags, the same type of tags that you use when you're using computer science or you're doing web coding. There's tags. And so that idea of what computers can read in tagging, we've brought that over to documents, and you need to make sure that certain elements are going to be tagged clearly. So together, when you put together the idea of headers, bookmarks, and tags, you're going to create the blueprint for an accessible document. So they're going to give it structure, they're going to give it navigation, and they're going to give it meaning. But not every document uses the same combination of these. So let's go over what uses which, just so you have an idea, just so you know what you're looking for. Okay, so Word, it uses built-in styles like heading 1, heading 2, lists, and tables. Those become tags if you export to a PDF. That helps that PDF be accessible. And those bookmarks can be added for further navigation inside of that Word document. PowerPoint relies on slide titles as headings. There's a reading order pane that controls the tag order, and those tags and bookmarks, they're created on that export to PDF. So again, that keeps that accessibility if you need to export it to PDF. In Excel, you want to use header rows, column titles, and sheet names to create your structure. And again, those are going to map into those tags if you have to export to PDF. And then within a PDF itself, it's the most complicated version of this. It has a full tag tree, which is headings, paragraphs, lists, tables, images. The bookmarks act like that clickable table of contents within it. And again, without the tags or OCRs, PDFs are just absolutely unreadable to screen readers. It is incomprehensible, no accessibility at all. So each format handles accessibility differently, but the goal always the same. You want a clear structure, logical navigation, and usable reading order. Descriptive links. Descriptive links are important no matter what type of document you are using. Links have to tell you where you're going or what the action is. So what screen readers do, they pull up a list of links in a document lots of times, and that's just going to be like the list of what the link is. So it has to be clear without surrounding text. I know I've done this a million times too, right? You copy the URL from your browser and you paste it into a document or an email, you're ready to go. Well, that's not going to work for accessibility. It doesn't have context. It's not going to be clear. Things like click here or read more, also completely meaningless out of context. Imagine, close your eyes, and I'm going to tell you where you're supposed to go. Okay, click here, also click here, read more, click here. What did those go to? You don't know. Can't click on it to find out. You're not going to be able to understand it. So you have to make that link text descriptive and specific. You want to avoid those vague phrases like click here. Also, visually, you want to make sure those links are underlined or otherwise visually distinct, not just color, right? We're never going to use color as our only single indication of something. And we all have our pretty standard idea at this point that underline means a link. And accessibility checkers often do not check for descriptive links, so you have to check. You have to know what you're looking for. Let's think about some examples. A non-descriptive link would be like, and this is how a screen reader might read it, https://www.uno.edu/cti/teaching-learning/accessibility. Oh, that's terrible. That's awful. Not going to know. Okay, so let's get a little bit better, right? We think, great, we're not going to do that. We're going to put in a thing. We're going to say looking for UNO's faculty accessibility website. Click here. But again, that click here is out of context. It's not specific and it doesn't tell us what we're doing. We need to have a descriptive link. So finally, what our descriptive link is going to be is it's going to be in context in the sentence, check out UNO's faculty accessibility website. We've linked the words UNO's faculty accessibility website, that when you click it, you know where you're going. You know what it's going to open. It's within context. Even if the screen reader reads that in a list, it's going to say UNO's faculty accessibility website. Now you know what that is, and you're ready to rock, and you've made a descriptive link. Alt text. Again, alt text is that alternative text, the short description that conveys the meaning of an image to users who can't see it. Screen readers read this description instead of the image. So imagine that you are reading a book and you're reading along, and the book says, I loved the ocean view, and there's a picture of an ocean view. And a sighted person could look at that picture and understand contextually what it means. It conveys meaning in the story or the document that you're reading. It's important. But if you have visual impairment or you're using a screen reader, you can't see that. So there's information that you're missing. That alt text has to tell you what that information is. So rather than someone saying like, and as you can see in the picture, it was beautiful in the text, and then assuming you could see the picture, the alt text would then say something like an image of San Diego sunset from Imperial Beach. The sun sets in the west and the colors are pink, blue, and purple, whatever the image is, right? Now we know someone who is using a screen reader would have the description of what that image is as well, and would not be missing that important information that they need to fully understand this document. So you want to be concise but descriptive. You want to explain the purpose, not every detail. So if the idea of, for example, a bar chart was to show enrollment rising from 2020 to 2025, you could have text that says bar chart showing enrollment rising from 2020 to 2025. You want to avoid redundancy, don't say image of or picture of. I clearly struggle with that one when I was giving you my description. I said image of. It's easier when you're writing to remind yourself, or you can write it out that way and then just take out your image of, picture of, no problem. If you have a decorative image, you want to be able to mark those as decorative, because those are things that don't convey meaning in the text. So, for example, on this slide that we're looking at, there is a line under the words alt text in the heading. That is purely decorative. It doesn't do anything for this slide. There's no other meaning that it needs to convey. If I were going to mark this, I would mark that as decorative rather than explaining this is a thin line, right? I wouldn't need to do that. It doesn't convey meaning. I would be able to mark that as decorative, and a screen reader would know to just skip over it. They don't need to do it. It's absolutely fine. If you have things like complex images, like charts and diagrams, include a longer text explanation in the body of the text or in a linked appendix that is an accessible appendix, because that's going to be really complicated. So whereas our bar chart showing enrollment rising from 2020 to 2025, maybe we don't need to see each individual data point when we describe it that way. If we do need to know each individual data point, that's too long for an alt text. So we're going to need a descriptor in the text itself or in an appendix. Do tables need alt text? What a great question. So as I said before, tables should be marked with things like header rows and column headers. So they don't need alt text if they're properly tagged and they're interactive in that way. Screen readers know how to announce the structure, and those are called simple tables. So if it's like a table with 3 columns, 4 rows, you would have like column header uh, row 2, and you would have the description of what those are. And the most important thing there is to define header rows and columns correctly. You'll see an example of this in a bit. If you have a complex table, which conveys complex information, like they're multi-level headers or they're nested rows, again, that's where you're going to want to provide that summary in the surrounding text. So this table shows student enrollment trends by year, by program. By year is this way, and by program is this way. And you're really going to want to be able to describe that table in detail, because again, if you're somebody who has a visual impairment relying on a screen reader, that is conveying meaning that you need, and there's no way for a screen reader to understand that meaning with those complex tables. It's really why you want to stick to simple tables in an image of a table, then yes, you're going to need alt text because that's an image. We just went over that. So if it's an image, you need an alt text or a text version provided somewhere else in the document, just like we went over with images in general. Color contrast. We're going to be going over this much more when we talk about design. Um, not the next webinar, but the one after that. But just as a quick idea, because it does come up in documents, we want to talk about the color contrast. It's that difference in the brightness between the text or the graphic and its background. We have all had this happen. Someone has attempted to use, I don't know, yellow text on a white background. Use a yellow crayon when your little kid's coloring, right? And they're like, look, I drew a flower. And you're like, I can't see that at all. There is no contrast. So imagine that, but you're trying to get vital information from a necessary document. That color contrast is going to ensure readability for people with low vision or even color blindness. So the requirements say that normal text has to be 4.5 to 1 contrast ratio. Large text with its 18 point or 14 point if it's bold has to have a 3 to 1 ratio. And non-text elements also have to meet those same contrast requirements. How can I possibly know if it meets those requirements? Don't worry. There are like a million cool checkers out there that will tell you. There's all these cool free tools like WebAIM Contrast Checker or the Color Contrast Analyzer. These are online free tools that you can use to help check the contrast in particular colors. And a lot of document accessibility checkers will also help you with those things. You never want to use color alone to show meaning. So if I said the items in red are required, and someone who was colorblind read that or had low vision or some sort of vision impairment, they would not be able to make those distinguishments. How would they know which items are required? That's not going to be something that we want to do alone just with color. And we always want to use those high contrast color combinations. When in doubt, use dark text on a light text on a dark background, black text on white text on black. You're never going to have a problem with those. You'll never go wrong with those combinations. Okay, so the last step you'll see in any accessibility checker is going to be a human check. You're going to want to run a checker, and then you're going to want to verify it with your own eyes. Let's talk about some free tools for testing that accessibility so you know what it is you need to be looking at, how you can start checking these things. There are a bunch of free screen readers if you want to have the experience of a screen reader so that you know when you're doing that human check whether what you did worked and what else you should be looking for. NVDA is Windows only, but it is a very, very common screen reader. If you are on a Mac or iOS, VoiceOver is built in to your computer and can be used on anything that you're using there. And Windows also has Narrator. Those are for screen readers. In terms of accessibility checkers, every Microsoft Office product has an accessibility checker. We're going to show you those in just a few minutes. Wave is free for online documents. You can use that as an evaluation tool. And then if you are on Windows, there is a great free accessibility checker, the PDF accessibility checker or PAC. Really great to use. It does have higher standards than the ones that we need. So it checks to standard 2.2. We only need to be at 2.1. So if you are making things accessible through those PAC standards, if you have Windows and you're using that checker, you are going to be good to go. Those standards are exacting. I've used it before and it is really, really easy to use and a good checker, but will have those higher standards. So you don't actually need to hit absolutely everything that it's going to be doing. Don't worry, you're going to be sent all of this, but here is a quick accessibility checklist. So when you get this presentation, you can have this checklist. But again, just to keep it in your mind as we're starting to go through some of these demos, what are those big things that we're looking for? This isn't going to get into those exacting standards, but those big things that we've talked about. We want headings, alt text, descriptive links that are not just like click here. Properly tagged lists and tables. We want that bookmark/table of contents for navigation, color contrast, language declared in the properties, that metadata information, forms and instructions being clear. And we need to do that OCR, right? Can't stress that enough. We need to have PDFs that are not just image only, they have to have text. And then you want to run some sort of accessibility checker within whatever document you are creating or outside of that document to put that document into the accessibility checker. Okay, so that is our high level overview, our slightly less high level overview. Now let's see some of this in action. I'm going to turn this over to Bree, who is going to walk you through looking at some of these pieces in Word, in Microsoft Word, and in Microsoft PowerPoint.
Okay, thanks, Meredith. Now that we've had the high level overview, let's just kind of take a look as to what this actually looks like when we apply it in context. So here we have a document that we purposefully made incorrectly, and what we're going to take the time to look at is how the accessibility checker works inside of Microsoft Word, point out some of the most common issues that we see, and also identify some of the issues that may not be picked up by the accessibility checker that we have to come back with a human eye just to review and make those final corrections. So very similar to doing a spelling and grammar check inside of Microsoft Word, you would want to start off at the top of your menu and select Review. And rather than selecting spelling and grammar check, we're actually going to select Check Accessibility. Once we select Check Accessibility, we will check it again. And on the right-hand side of your screen, it's going to identify any error that it may pick up. And so what we're going to do is work through these errors, correct them, and then also correct those issues that are not appearing in this list. So if we're working our way down, the very first thing that it identifies is the missing alternative text for the image that's on the screen. If I select Group 3, what I love about Microsoft Word is that it's going to identify why is this an issue, and then also provide the steps on how to fix it. And to do so, you would simply right-click on the image, select Edit Alt Text, and here you'll have that option to enter those details that Meredith was mentioning earlier. And sometimes it may be kind of difficult to figure out what exactly am I supposed to put here. And we are going to touch this in a later section that we're going to be hosting. But I also recommend to just maybe close your eyes and think back to elementary school, middle school, when we all learned about adjectives, and just think about what it is that you want someone who can't visually see this to understand from what it is that you're trying to get across. Or if it were a decorative image, again, just something that had no meaning and had no purpose to what it is that you're trying to share with your audience, you would simply mark it as decorative. Whether we entered something inside of the box or marked it as decorative, it's going to automatically save whatever change that we made. And then it's also going to remove it from our list of warnings. Next, it points out that we have a merge or split cell. So why is this exactly an issue? Well, if I were using a screen reader, a student, a visitor, whoever it is that's accessing this material, it gets confusing and the screen reader cannot identify what item belongs where. Now, I am guilty of merging cells simply for look and appeal, but now that I know better, we would simply select the entire box, right-click, scroll down until we see split cells, and then this may be different depending on the version of Microsoft you're using. It might do it automatically, or you might have to tell it the number of columns that you want and the number of rows. Once you do that, it splits it up, and then we can just highlight our text and drag it to the category that it belongs. Now, while we're here, I will point out one thing that is an issue that Meredith mentioned that's not populating in our list of warnings is that I don't have column headers inside of my chart. So this is one thing that you would want to pay attention to in that review process. And if you don't know how to add an additional column, row to add those headers, you could just literally right click on your box, any one, and click Insert, Rows Above, and then I would simply add my column label here. And same for the other box. The next issue is hard to read text contrast, which is just identifying this color. And if you've been noticing on the right-hand side, when it points out the issue, if you click on it, it's going to automatically jump you to that place within the document. So if it's more than one page, you don't have to worry about scrolling. It should automatically take you there. And for this, again, color contrast, I like to keep it simple. Black on a white background, white on a light background, just to keep it clear and concise. Now, as you can see here, it says no accessibility issues are found, and this is incorrect. Now, I will say, I do like the checker because it catches majority of the things, but the rest of the issues that we're going to point out is going to be, it's listed on the list that we'll provide to you all later. And so the first thing, let's get into navigation. If I select review, check accessibility again, there's something called the navigation pane. This is what we're using so that a screen reader can navigate throughout the document. But right now, on the left-hand side, there's absolutely nothing there. It just tells me this is a great way to keep track of whatever it is that I'm doing. So let's get into the styles of Microsoft Word. Titles, heading 1, heading 2, bullet points. Now, if you're like me, I'm a manual girly. I capitalize, bold font, center my title on my page, and I move on about life. But now I know that this isn't accessible. So to correct this, we want to pay attention to our styles. If you are highlighting healthy eating tips, which is technically the title of this, and if I select styles here or styles at the top, I can choose exactly what this is. So I'm actually going to select title. Now, if you don't like the color blue, you don't have to use the color blue for any of these. If I were to highlight it again, it highlights in this style bar, right click, modify, and I can change the color to black, and it will keep the exact same setting throughout my duration working in this document. Now I have a subheading, healthy eating includes. If I were to highlight this and select heading 1, it's going to then create a tag. It's almost like a bookmark, or it's going to start collecting a sort of like a table of content. So if I were utilizing a screen reader and I worked my way through the document, but I didn't quite hear everything that was mentioned into this section, I could go over to my navigation, select healthy eating, and a screen reader would automatically pick back up in this area without me having to start all over from the beginning. And that's why it's important to set our headings. And we could even do this for food group examples, and I'll select heading 2. Now, it's important that we pay attention to the order. You don't want heading 2 to come before heading 1 or heading 1 to come at the end. It does matter. The next thing that the accessibility checker did not catch is our URL link. So yes, we have to change these. And to do so, if you highlight over any link that's in your document, right click, select edit hyperlink, you will have a pop-up and it says text to display. And we would simply change this to the CDC website, I'll say about healthy eating. It's going to keep the hyperlink, but keep the description. And so we're doing this so that users know what it is that they're clicking on and that it's more clear and concise. And the last thing, if you're using items that are listed, numbered, we want to make sure that we are using the pre-built-in bullet points or numbering, whatever fits your use case scenario. Now that we've checked everything and gone through the top to the bottom. We're going to save this as a PDF. And we're ready. So you could either choose save as a PDF here, or in this case, it shouldn't say save a copy, it'll say save as. Locate your spot and switch it to a PDF and save, and you're good to go. Now we're going to transition over to PowerPoint. Okay. So in Microsoft PowerPoint, my favorite thing is once you've figured it out in Word, it's the exact same thing in PowerPoint. So we don't really have to relearn anything. And in this case, we're going to do the exact same thing, review the accessibility checker, and we're also going to pay attention to slide order and why it's important to use the built-in layouts that PowerPoint provides. So I'm going to select review, which is in the exact same spot as Microsoft, select check accessibility and select it again. And again, as you can see, everything is appearing in the exact same place. So let's take a look at why it's important to use a built-in layout for PowerPoint. So if I'm looking at my errors, there's an issue that says slide 1 is missing a title. But actually, I have a title here, but instead of using a layout, I actually utilized a text box. I increased the font size, made it bold, made it pretty, and I think I'm good to go, and the answer is no. Now, the reason for this is that using these layouts helps the screen reader identify the slide order so that your users know what order they're reading documents. So if I go up to the top, select Home and Layout, we're given a few options. Since this is a title slide, I'll select Title. It'll give me the layout, and I'm just going to grab this text and get rid of this text box, paste, and I'll get rid of the subtitle, and the warning has disappeared. Next, my next issue is checking reading order on slide 2. I'm going to go back to normal and hop to slide 2. If I select review, check accessibility, there is a reading order pane. And on the right side of the screen, it's a list or an order of what the screen reader will read and what they're going to read first. So currently it says that this item, slide 1, is going to be read first, then the title, and then the content. So it's almost like if you were to read a book and you started on page 20 instead of chapter 1, you don't even know what chapter you're reading. And I am guilty of never checking this, and now that I know, I feel bad. But we're going to correct it and everything's going to be okay. So to change the slide order, it's just a drag and drop. So I'm going to grab the title and I'm going to move it to the first spot. Ideally, we'll drop it down and then slide it up. And then slide 1, I'll slide it to the third spot. And now it's reading the title first, the content, and then this link. But what if you have something on your slide that's not important, that your students really don't need to read, or your viewers? You would just uncheck it and the screen reader will simply skip over it and mark it decorative, just as if you were doing an alt text. And then the last thing, we have a few missing alt text pieces, and for this sake, I'll just review one. On slide 3, and it's just missing the descriptive, and just as if you were doing Microsoft again, it's just a simple right click, edit alt text, and you would enter your details. Now there is a button that says generate a description for me. I will say take it with a grain of salt. It's not always accurate. You might need to be expounding upon biology, and it gives you something that's talking about a chocolate chip cookie. Who knows? So with everything, just make sure you're going back, checking it with your human eyes based off of the checklist that will be provided for you. And with that being said, I'm going to turn everything over to Whitney, who's going to go into detail about how you can do this using Excel.
Thank you so much, Bree. Let me get in here and share my screen. Okay, many of the things that you've already seen examples of Bree do are possible in Excel. And so we're going to start at the exact same spot with our accessibility checker, and then we're going to go back and put our human eyes on it and see how we do. So first you start with the review tab and check accessibility, and you'll see that it pops up all of my errors and it marks them by type of errors. So I have missing alt text, exclusive use of color, merged cells, and then default sheet names. What's really neat is that it helps you fix this. So I want to see where my missing alt text is. So I click on this and it tells me it's this chart. So I could either right click and edit alt text, or in this version, I can add a description right here. And I've already typed one up, so y'all don't have to bear with me. But basically what I'm going to do is describe the bar chart and what the data is that is within that bar chart. So you'll see it is now gone from my list of accessibility issues. So I'll click on my next one. This is just a decorative image. So I'm going to mark this as decorative because I want the screen reader to skip right over it. Then we're going to go to our third one. And this is again another chart. So we are going to stick our alt text in there, and you will see that the issue disappears. So let's keep working through these issues. The next one is exclusive use of color. And right here, this is something Meredith brought up. You do not want to use color to signify something exclusively. So right here, you can see that this has quotations around it, so it's not relying on the red. But let's fix this issue where it is red to show negative. So I'm going to hit Format Cell, and I'm going to choose for negative numbers that I'm going to show the negative sign in front of it so that people who have vision impairments can see that. Possible color blindness can see that right there. And then we have merged cells. Merged cells are a big no-no because it's hard for the screen reader to work through those. So you're going to want to unmerge your cells and be very careful about your use of merged cells. And so for these, what I'm going to do is I have my enrollment where it goes, I have my change where it goes, and then I can add another descriptor right here, percentages and totals. So I have gotten rid of my merged cells. This is one of your simplest fix. So you have to name all of your sheets. So the first sheet I'm going to name, I'm just double clicking into the sheet name and I'm going to call it points earned. Then enrollment changes. So you want some sort of description on here. This is what they were talking about earlier, where you want, when the screen reader goes through it, it's going to use those sheets to help it navigate through there. And then sheets 4 and 5 are blank, and I'm going to delete those in just a minute. But I want to work through the rest of my accessibility issues. So I have some hard to read text contrast. Meredith and Bree both brought this up. You need to make sure your color contrast falls within the acceptability of WCAG, but let's work through these. So right here, this is because I have very light text font color on top of a white background. So I can go in here and change this to black. White background, black font is often the easiest. Unless you need color for a specific reason, try to stay away from it. So let's format these cells. I have yellow font on light font on a yellow background. So I'm going to go with, hold on. Let's see. black, but I also am not a fan of that yellow because I have no reason for it. So I'm also going to go ahead and change that fill color, and I'll go ahead and do the same here. But when I did that, now it still has the font issue. So let's format that color and make it dark. So these are all black and white. So that gets rid of all of the accessibility issues except for not naming these pages that I'm going to delete in just a minute. So those are what the accessibility checker picked up, but there's a lot of other issues going on. Now, this is probably one of the busiest, weirdest spreadsheets you've ever seen, but that's just so we can demonstrate a lot of things in one spot. So one of the most important things you want to remember about Excel and accessibility is that you need some sort of descriptive text in cell A1 that describes what's on that sheet. So this will just put as summary of grades. So when the screen reader gets to cell A1, it will read that and they know what that sheet's about. Now, another thing is you want to make sure your text is all visible within the cell. So I could pull this out, or even better, I could wrap text. So right there in cell A1, it's still not all visible. So I have my wrap text function up here, and you'll see it'll wrap the text around so that it all fits into the cell. Another thing you want to do is make sure that you create a table with headers. So we're going to go in here and I'm going to select my data. I'm going to insert table, and I'm going to mark right here that my table already has headers because it does. Subject, name, attempted, and earned. But you'll see that I have some issues right here. I have columns that have no actual data in it, and they have no headers, so it called them column 1, column 2. This is one reason it's really important to delete columns or rows that you are not using, because when you pull them into a table, it's not going to know how to format that. Another issue we have right here is this. See this page? That is not descriptive text for that hyperlink. So I can right click on that. I can edit my hyperlink. And right here, I can put link to Google homepage. Now a screen reader is going to read exactly what that person with vision impairments is, what that hyperlink leads to for them. So let's move on. So we don't want to merge header cells, which we already fixed just a little bit ago. And so we've already corrected that issue. But we do have some empty rows. So we want to go through and delete our empty rows. There we go. And then another change we want to look at is in here. You can see if you look at the chart that we're missing some data. So you want to make sure that you all have all your data points in your data table. So right here, if you wanted it to be 0, you can type in 0 and it will still not show up. And that's perfectly fine if the data point's 0. But you can also put in NA and it won't show up, but that will tell the screen reader that that data spot is inapplicable to what they're going through. Another thing we have going on here is this. You only want one table per page. It's very hard for a screen reader to navigate multiple tables per page, so always make sure you stick them on separate sheets. So right there, I cut the table from that page and I pasted it on this page. And finally, we have an empty sheet. We have several of them. We need to rename this new table. And then we need to delete any empty sheets because the screen reader is going to try to navigate to them and not know what to do. So those are the main ways to work with the accessibility checker built into Excel and to put some human eyes on it. There are tons of resources out there, accessibility checklists for Excel. I know a lot of us do a lot more heavy data lifting and data analysis and viewing through charts and such in Excel. So this was a very simplistic way to go through it. But you can always go in here and go File, Save as Adobe PDF, and it will save all those things we put in. The sheets, the headers, all those things that help the screen reader move through the Excel spreadsheet. So with that note, I am going to turn it over to Meredith.
Hello again, everyone. Okay, so we've come to perhaps the most complicated thing to remediate in terms of documents, and that is PDFs. PDFs can be a real pain, and let's talk about why that is for a second. So PDFs are meant to be static documents, right? You're not supposed to be able to change them. That's the whole deal, right? You want to make sure that that information stays the same. So while in Word and PowerPoint and Excel, you can go into the document and easily go and change some text and mark some headers and do this really simply, PDFs are not going to make it that easy for you. Unfortunately, lots of the things that we use are PDFs for exactly this reason, right? We want them to be static documents. If you're sending your students a seminal journal article, you want to make sure that they're reading all the pieces of it and they're not going to go in and accidentally delete something. Moreover, this is the thing that things turn into when they are scanned most of the time. So if you scanned an article, I don't know, last century, which I think might be the time that I actually scanned this book chapter or this story from a book that I am sharing with you right now. Um, when that scanned, that came in as a PDF. And you've probably been using that because some of those things are hard to find, right? Can't find an alternate version because the first thing that you're always going to do with a PDF that's difficult and might not be accessible, you're going to see if there's an alternate version of it. So for example, this right here is Alice Walker's story, Everyday Use. This is a real life thing that I've used in real life classes, this exact scan that I made myself, again, probably last century, which hurts me a little bit to say. And at the time, this was the best that I could do. Now, I could probably find an accessible version of this that was HTML, that would easily be read on mobile, that was ready to go. So I wouldn't worry about remediating this document. And that's always the first thing that I want to do. Is there some sort of alternative to PDF? So Whitney and Bree showed you how you could save things like Word documents as PDF so they're accessible. But if that's something that you can send as a Word document, send it as a Word document. That's just going to be an easier way to go about this. If it isn't, okay, now we're in PDF land. So once we are in PDF land, the most important thing that we can do is make sure that our PDF is text, right? We want to make sure that it is OCR, like we talked about. Now, I want to pause here for a second and talk a little moment about PDF tools. For whatever reason, every tool to remediate PDFs and make them accessible is a paid tool. Your version of Acrobat that you download for free, that is the Acrobat Reader, will not fix them. Your thing like Preview in a Mac, as far as I know, I have never found one that fixes all of the accessibility things the way that it needs to be fixed. I have never found a free tool. That does mean that there's going to have to be some paid tools that come into this. Many of you probably do not have access to these tools. You likely don't have access to Acrobat Pro from your campus license or whatever other tools you may want to be using for this. Acrobat Pro is a big one. Take a breath. Don't freak out about it. Yes, PDFs are hard to remediate. Probably got a lot of them. Going to be paid tools. Your campuses know this. I promise you that your campuses know this. Your campuses have guidelines and guidance coming for what software you're going to be using and how you're going to be accessing that software. I'm going to be showing you the simple basics here today using Acrobat Pro. Again, so you sort of know what you're looking for, what it's going to be able to remediate, and what you're going to have to put eyes on and visually assess. That's really what we're doing. But there's software that you're going to have to use that you may not have access to yet. Okay? That freaks me out too. I don't like it either. I don't like that it's paid. I wish that it were free, but We're going to take a breath about it, and we're going to wait for our universities to give us a little bit more guidance on what software we're going to be using and how we're going to access that software. Okay, just wanted to make sure that we were clear on that page because, again, I don't like the having to pay for stuff either. I'm certainly not going to pay for it out of my own money. I want to make sure everyone has the access that they need. So when we're using something like Acrobat Pro or whatever remediator that we are using, that first thing that we're going to check, as we know, it's going to be OCR. We need to check OCR. If we're using Acrobat Pro, we're going to come over here, look at all of our tools. We're going to look for our accessibility symbol, which is a human in a circle. That's usually going to be our symbol for accessibility checking. So we're going to click on that. You can see the first thing it says is automatically tag PDF. Those tags, they're so important, but we're actually going to do an accessibility check first. I know that this one isn't tagged, but we're going to do an accessibility check just to show you what that is. Okay, so let's check for accessibility. We're going to click accessibility checker. It's going to tell us all the things that it's checking for, and we're going to click start checking. Oh no, we have so many issues with our beautiful story, Everyday Use, which if you haven't read it. It's a fantastic story. Our document has 6 issues. Our page content has 2 issues. We have alternative text issues. We have table issues, list issues, heading issues. Oh my God, that's so much. Okay, so again, that first thing we're going to check, image only PDF. Well, it obviously can't do any of these other things that it needs to do because this is an image only PDF. Our screen reader can't even read it. That has to be the first thing that we fix. There will be some sort of way to do this in whatever thing you are using to remediate. In Acrobat Pro, it's going to be this scan and OCR button. Sometimes that takes a little bit to go through. So rather than going through that actual process and having it work here at live time, I've already done one. So now this one has OCR. It is text readable. Again, we can come here and check that, get our accessibility checker going. And you can see where it said 6 issues before. Now it says 5 issues, and that first one, image only PDF, it's passed. Now we can worry about tags. When I say that tags are important, I promise you most of these issues, many of these issues are going to go away once this is tagged. You do not have to tag it yourself. Auto tagging exists. If you had to tag things yourself, it would be awful. So when we have any particular issue, and again, in this particular software, and every software that does this will have this slightly differently, we're going to be able to right click here and click fix. Going to take a minute, and it's going to say tagged PDF passed. It passed now. And you can see all of these other issues that we had, a whole bunch of them went away. We don't have those issues anymore because we tagged our PDF. Hooray! That's what we needed to do. Okay, some of these are very, very easy fixable issues, right? Remember when I said you need to have that language marked? We don't have that here. We can right click, mark that as English. Our title, you need to have a title in here. We don't have that. So we need to get a title. We don't want to leave that how it is. We want this to be everyday use. And again, we really want to put that metadata in so we can also say our author here is Alice Walker because we know that, right? So now we have our metadata. Some of these issues, you can tell, it literally tells you you need to put human eyes on this. You need someone who can visually assess this. So you're going to need to be able to check to see if that color contrast meets those standards. It's not going to check that for you. Okay, well, I know that this one does. I have pre-checked this. So I'm going to go ahead, right click, and mark that as a pass. We're also going to need alt text. We have an alt text issue. When we click down on that, we can see we have figures that need alt text. If I click on that figure, it will show me what that figure is. Now, because I scanned this from a book, it is reading all of those individual marks as a figure, as an image that I need to mark. Well, I can't think of something that was more decorative than something like this scan that's from the spine of a book. I can right click here and click fix. The cool thing about Acrobat Pro is it's going to let me go through all of these, all of 7 of these issues at one time. I don't have to go through it page by page. And I can mark this one as decorative right there and move on to the next one. Oh, that is also decorative. And continue to do that and mark all of those as decorative. You can see as I did that, I didn't click save and close, so that's on me. You gotta save and close. As I do that, you'll see the number goes down. Always make sure you're saving your work. We have a headings issue. What could that mean? Okay, so it says appropriate nesting. Remember how I said you can't put an H2 where there's supposed to be an H1? You got to have that heading sorted. It's gonna need to have that in order. But don't worry, if we don't have that in order, we can easily fix that. We can go to that element and look here. It's saying that this title right here, everyday use, is the problem. We can go to that element and we can fix it. One of the ways that we can do that is also where we're going to be looking at our logical reading order. Now, the same thing with PowerPoint, like Bree was saying, that the computer needs to know the order to read things in. The PDF also needs to know the order to read things in. And you can do that by coming here and clicking on your reading order. And now you'll see all the elements here are highlighted and they have little numbers on them, the order that it's going to read these things in. And so it's going to tell us in that reading order how we're going to read all of these pieces. So I'm going to move everyday use. I want this title to be up at the top. I want my students to read everyday use before they read Alice Walker. That's probably how I would read it on the page visually. That's what I want them to do. And you can see over here, it's got at the bottom the a collection that this is pulled from originally. I don't want it to read that in the middle of the story. I want that to actually come right here after Alice Walker's name, but before our epigraph over here, right? I want that there. So now this is how it's going to be read, and I had to make sure to check that. Let's see, did that go ahead and fix our headings issue because I told it to read it just the way that it should? Let's check again. No, that doesn't fix the headings issue. So again, those sorts of things that you're doing to visually assess and put that on the reading order, that's not going to make things better in terms of those tags and those elements. So what we can do here is now we can go to our tags panel. We can show that in our tags panel. Remember when I said you don't want to tag things by yourself? It's going to be a whole pane. Please look at this. This is a whole pane. Now remember, you don't have to know every single tag. You don't have to be able to know what every single tag here means. You just want to be able to look at the big ones and make sure that those are going to be correct. I can see pretty easily that the problem that we have here is this is the top title. This is the first thing, and it's saying H2. Well, we know now, we know that that has to be H1. I can right click on that, come to properties. On my tag, I can change my type of tag. So again, that's why you want to be familiar with those basic types. You don't have to know every single one, and you can always look it up. I'm going to change that to heading level 1. I'm going to close that. Now this says heading level 1. Again, that doesn't change anything with our reading order. I had to change our reading order manually. Those are separate pieces, the tag panel and the reading order panel, separate pieces. If I go back to our accessibility checker and I want to check again, and now I do not have any issues with those headings. The alternate text, again, I'm not going through every single one of them now for time, but I would have checked that and those would be fine in our accessibility checker. And then we did go check our reading order already, right? We checked it. It's exactly what we wanted. So now we can mark that as a pass. It's that simple when you have something that is helping you and doing this automatically. Imagine having to do all of that on your own. It would be an absolute pain. Just to show you again, something else where reading order might come into play over here, right here, this particular reading order, the way that it is set here. Look at this one, actually, I have different versions of these, I apologize. So if I come over to my reading order here, you can see it's done its best to try to figure out what it is that I want from my reading order based on how it sees it. But actually, I want my students to read this in an interview part first. That's what I really want. So again, I can move that right up to the top over here. Just click and drag, assuming that my mouse will cooperate with me. I can always move that down if I'm having trouble. And there you go, right? And so now if we do our accessibility checker on this one, we can see if we have any issues on this particular PDF. Again, we're going to come prepare for accessibility. We're going to check for accessibility. We're going to start checking. What are the issues that we have? The only issues that we have are the manual things. So we checked our logical reading order. Got to check our color contrast. I don't know that our color contrast is 100% going to pass. That's the kind of thing that I would be able to want to check with one of those color contrast checkers. And also a thing that it's not checking for me, but that we know it should be doing. I've clearly made this part red because I want my students to understand it or look at it more clearly. That's not going to show up in the accessibility checker, and that's not something I can change on a PDF. Again, that's why you don't want to use a PDF if there's something else you can use. This looks like it's from a PowerPoint. I could just show my students the PowerPoint. I don't have to save it as a PDF to show them the PowerPoint. So there's not going to be an easy way to fix that because PDFs are meant to be static. So that's the quick and dirty on PDFs. Oh, one more thing about PDFs. None of the ones that I am showing you need bookmarks. They only need to be bookmarked for longer documents. If I did need to bookmark them and they were not bookmarked, I could say new bookmarks from structure. And if I do that, it's going to pull that tag style. It's going to show me all of those different tags that I have. So let me see if I can do that here. Yes, perfect. I do not have any bookmarks on this one. I can say new bookmarks from structure. It's going to ask me what levels I want. So it would show me all of those different tag levels like H1, H2, H3, and I can decide what level I want. I probably don't want it to bookmark everything like paragraphs and sections and spans. It's going to show every single one of those, and you can remember how many there were in that tag panel. So we're not going to want that. We're only going to want headings. So I could say, okay, let's just do H1, and I can pick these the same that I would anything by clicking on it and then control clicking if I wanted multiple ones, or if I wanted some in a row, I can click shift and get all those ones in a row. So I can get multiple that way. Here, it's just H1. This does not have any subheadings. So I'm going to go click OK. It's going to give me something that is untitled. I don't want this to be untitled. I want this to be titled Everyday Use because I want screen readers to be able to do that pretty easily. Here, again, my H1 is the same as the title there because my H1 is just the title. But you can imagine if there were a bunch of subheadings, they would also be nested under here and people could use those to go through it as bookmarks. So that's why you tag things first because it's going to be able to use that structure in your bookmarks. Okay. Again, that is a lot. PDFs are a lot. That's why we're saying don't use them if you can use something else. And also, again, the software that you're going to need, guidance is going to come from your universities, hopefully soon, about how you should be accessing that software and what software you should be using. This was just one example of a common software that we do tend to have. And I'm going to stop sharing. And now I know that there have been some questions. That was, like we said, just sort of a quick and dirty on the basics of some of the documents that we use and some of the ways to remediate those documents or think about those documents. So now we want to open this up for questions. You can go ahead and put your questions in that Q&A and we'll be able to answer them. So if you have them in chat, we may have missed them. Chat moves quickly. You might want to put them in the Q&A so that we can try to answer them for you. Okay. So I see one question in the Q&A that says, in scientific writing, faculty often have figures with multiple panels. Publishers usually want details in figure caption. These are not completely replicated in the text, e.g. p-values for statistics. How should this be handled? You're going to want to check with individual publishers if you are publishing something for their accessibility standards, right? So you're going to want to know what the journal standards are and how they handle that. If you're talking about creating something that your students are going to be seeing or accessibility in general, that's a really good place to have something where you have an appendix and you've described it. So remember when we were talking about doing tables, how alt text wasn't going to be able to fit that? That's a great place so that you can just have an appendix and someone could go read the whole detail, and you'd want to detail absolutely everything that's in that table in text so that someone can then understand what that table or chart or graph is trying to convey. But again, in terms of publishing your work, you'd want to check with the individual publisher.
Meredith, I think a follow-up to that question from the Q&A is, does that mean equations in a Word document are not accessible?
I will be honest, I'm not 100% sure about how equations in Word documents are read. That would be a great thing to explore. If you're putting them in, again, as an image, then you're going to need alt text. That's not going to be screen reader friendly. So if you have just copied and pasted, if it's something where it's inherent to Word and it's in the text, I would not be surprised if a screen reader can cover it, but that would be something if you're using like a particular type text, like those specific math texts, those can be read by screen readers, but I guess it depends on how you are putting it in and what particular um, ways that you have done that and what you're using would sort of be my answer on that one.
Meredith, do you have any insight around Canva and Canva documents becoming accessible?
Sure. So Canva does have things like alt text and those basic accessibility tools. Those are built into Canva like they are with any other document or um, image creator. We're going to be going over media next time a little bit more. We're also really only going over tools that we know absolutely everybody has access to. And so not everybody has access to Canva. However, accessibility guidelines for almost any software that you can find, those are out there when you Google them. So I will bet you money that if you Google Canva accessibility WCAG 2.1 rules, how do I make my document accessible? Whatever it is that you'd want to Google, um, I bet you'd be able to find those guidelines and follow them because Canva is going to be concerned about accessibility the same way that Microsoft is concerned about accessibility.
All right, we had a question in the chat that says, do our internal staff-only documents need to be accessible? And I'm going to guess the answer is going to be yes, because everything that we do is publicly accessible and can be subject to a public records request. And so even if it's only used internally, it still needs to meet the standards that we are giving you today. Next question. Aubrey asked, how can we go about making our campus map PDF that we use for events, orientation, etc., accessible? What advice do you have for large images that maybe are used like a map?
So again, I would say you probably want to Google some standards for how to do this on a map. I'm not an expert on how to do that. If I were going to posit a guess as to how I would probably go about that, I would one, see if there's a way to make some sort of HTML accessible version that you could use with a keyboard that would have some sort of descriptor as you went through that map. Or if you could create a descriptive text to go with that that explained relatively where all those buildings are, what all those buildings are. The academic honors college is on the far north right part of campus. Describe it in some way like that. Again, I am not an expert on that particular feature, so I would want to say that you would want to go check. I'm sure that there is somebody in a community who has had to do this and has come up with some good guidelines. But my best guess is always going to be some sort of accompanying descriptive text or trying to find an alternate format. Because, like you saw within a PDF, there's not really a way to like draw an outline and say this part of the map is the north end of campus and have a PDF reader go through that. You could sort of make boxes and tag things that way, but it still wouldn't work out very nicely, I think. So you'd want to try to find an alternative in that particular case would be my off the cuff best guess on that.
Susan in the chat asks that her university has mentioned emails as well being part of this, and I know that a lot of people use signatures in their email. So will we have information maybe on the next webinar about accessibility and emails?
So your email accessibility is going to be just like your document accessibility. Anything that is an image needs to have alt text. Your email program likely has a way to put alt text into those images that you have put in your signature. Again, people use differing email programs, so I can't tell you specifically what the steps are for your particular email program, but all of them do have a way to do that. And the same thing when you're putting links into your email, as we just talked about with all of these, those need to be descriptive links. So rather than you can find it here, paste link in, which I am so guilty of all the time. You want to write some text, highlight it, figure out how you're going to link that within your email program. So that's going to be really individual, but all of these rules do apply. So those basics of things like alt text, descriptive links, color contrast, making sure that you have lists formatted as lists when they are lists, all of that is going to apply in any email program that you would be using and in any email that you would be sending. That's sort of my quick answer.
Do you know if the default setting in emails is in an accessible format, or will that be something we have to think about changing?
So there isn't necessarily a default that says accessibility, right? Because if you are pasting in a link, it is not that it knows what you would want that descriptive text to be. It's not that it automatically is going to come up with the alt text for an image for you. Those are always things that you are going to have to be doing and creating. So while the written part of your email may be accessible by a screen reader, it's not like it's coming out as an image. All of those individual pieces are always things that you are going to have to be doing when you create any document or any sort of written item, in email included. I hope that sort of answers the default question.
Our next question in the Q&A, a lot of mathematics is typed using LaTeX and compiling to a PDF. Do you know how accessible this or anything about making it accessible?
I don't actually know that particular one. I would assume that there is probably some way that that is converted and that screen readers read that. And if somebody in the chat is more familiar with that and has an answer, please let me know. But that's not something that I know offhand. Again, there are guidelines for just about everything that you can Google. And when you know these basic ideas of things like things needing alt text, if it comes over as an image or headers or those types of pieces, then that's what you can be looking for when you look up those guidelines.
Hey, any last questions? We have just a few minutes left. And while I fill space, I just want to thank Brianna Elliott so much for signing throughout this webinar. This has been an incredible resource, and we are really grateful to have her.
Hello, I don't know who Brianna Elliott is, but it just put me in that box. I'm actually Lakeisha Trotter. Everyone says KT. That's me. I didn't know who Brianna Elliott was supposed to be.
Okay,
They
well,
just
we are
put me there.
so
That's my
grateful
box.
to have you. So grateful.
Oh, no problem. It's nice to be here. Thank you all so much.
Perfect. We are going to share out those that signed up for the webinar with your institutions. So if you're somebody who needed to get credit for being here, we are going to attempt to help you with that. As I mentioned several times throughout the chat, we will make all of this recording available. So you will have access to the video, you will have access to the transcript, and you will have access to the PowerPoint slides. And then I see a couple of hands raised. So Guy Carlisle can we give Guy the opportunity to ask a question?
Okay, so can you hear me?
Can.
All right, wonderful. I didn't receive a reminder and I just kind of logged into this, so I'm sorry I'm coming to the party late. Um, I give a test where I show pictures of buildings and I ask students to identify them. I'm not exactly sure how I need to address that with the ADA compliance. If you could give me some insight, that would be great.
So if those are test accommodations, you're actually going to want to check with your accessibility coordinator for students who does student test accommodations. They are amazing resources and will likely know what you need to do to make sure that the student can do that test, because that's not necessarily making that accessible in terms of the document. That's making sure that the student can take the test, which is a slight distinction. So I wouldn't want to tell you, put in alt text or something that would then give your students the answer. So you want to check with your testing coordinator and accommodations person on your campus for what the best way to go about that would be.
Well, right now, I'm wading through a number of videos where I am doing the closed captioning and so on, and I'm actually using, my cursor and pointing at images in a PowerPoint. And I'm not exactly sure how to make that. I mean, yeah, I can put in closed captions, but but that's not, if someone's blind, they can't see where the cursor is on the image. I
So
mean,
we're gonna talk about that in our next webinar. That's why we're having a whole session that's dedicated to media. That's gonna be those audio descriptions and audio description tracks. And we're gonna have a whole part of this that we're gonna discuss this in our next webinar because you're absolutely right about that particular issue.
so I didn't really hope, no offense, but I didn't really miss anything this time. I'm
Well,
sorry because I came in late.
you missed a lot, but not necessarily about media and captioning. That's going to be our next webinar. You missed a lot about document accessibility, but don't worry because this recording is going to be available and you can always
Yeah,
catch up.
that's great. Thanks.
No problem.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. It looks like our questions have kind of petered out.
I
So
did see one that I think we missed, and I'm so sorry. I just was looking through.
please.
I saw someone ask if they can use handwritten work that they've been handwriting on like tablets and give that to students. That's a really, really tricky one because, again, you need to make sure that it's got OCR so students can read it. There are some programs that will allow that handwritten work to be turned into text or do OCR on that handwritten work. If that's the case, then you're good, right? If the screen reader can read it, then it's fine. If that does not happen, then you would not be able to use that handwritten work because there would be no way for your student to access it. So that's really a matter of what program you're using and how that would translate over.
All right. Any last burning questions? Last minute or two. All right, everyone. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much to our amazing presenters, to our amazing interpreter. Thank you so much to the web accessibility coordinators that are doing this work on your campus. They are leading an awesome, big, large thing. And they need all of your help to get this right. So thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. Thank you to the learning management system coordinators on each campus. They are phenomenal resources for you as you kind of figure out what is accessible and how to make things accessible to your students. And we look forward to seeing you in a little less than a month. Our next webinar will be October 22nd from 3 to 4:30. We like to keep things consistent. It's a Wednesday, same time, same place. Recordings will be available for that too, but tell your friends. And thank you all so much. Have a wonderful Wednesday and a great rest of your week.